Today, I will tell you about a mysterious case that happened in Nanmen, Yunnan Province. The case occurred between 2007 and 2012. However, due to the negligence of the local police, it dragged on for so long that it was not solved until 2012. What makes this case so thrilling and eerie, reminiscent of ancient times? Let's find out together. Nanmen is a region in Jincheng Town, Jining County, Kunming City, Yunnan Province, China. This is a relatively small area, and it is not particularly remote, as roads and transportation are accessible nearby. However, from 2007 to 2012, a series of mysterious disappearances took place here. On May 1, 2007, a 12-year-old boy named Li Henhung went to the fields with his parents. Around 9 a.m., his parents told him to go home and prepare lunch so they could eat when they returned. The boy obeyed and went home. However, when his parents returned at noon, expecting a prepared meal, neither the food nor their son was there. Panic-stricken, they searched everywhere but found no trace of him. By 5 p.m., they still had no clue about his whereabouts, so they reported the case to the police. From that moment until December 2012, mysterious disappearances continued in the area. Most of the victims were males aged 14 to 22. By then, the total number of missing people had reached 11. Despite repeated reports from the victims' families, local police failed to uncover any leads. They merely speculated that the missing individuals had either run away to work elsewhere or, in the case of younger victims under 15, had been kidnapped. The police's irresponsibility frustrated the families of the missing people. They gathered and submitted a petition to the municipal police department. They also sought help from the media to spread awareness. When the case was finally broadcast on television, it shocked the entire police force and the Yunnan provincial government. Only then did they realize the severity and mystery of these disappearances. A special task force was immediately established, named the 11 Mysterious Disappearances in Jincheng. When the municipal police arrived, they connected the events, interviewed witnesses, and investigated suspects with criminal records in the area. Initially, they noted the following details. First, the disappearances did not occur in a remote or isolated area but in a place with regular traffic and transportation. Second, the disappearances did not happen late at night or in the dark. They occurred during the day, either when victims were returning from school or coming home from working in the fields. The time frame for the disappearances was typically between 9 a.m. and 11 a.m. Third, all the missing individuals were male, aged between 12 and 22 years old. The youngest victim was 12, and the oldest was 22. At this point, the city police started investigating potential suspects who might be responsible for these horrific murders. After an extensive review of records and interrogations, they identified one prime suspect, Zhang Yangming, who was 56 years old at the time. Zhang Yangming had a rather unusual background. Both his older brother and his mother had previously been prosecuted for murder. He himself had also served prison time for homicide. As a child, Zhang Yangming was described as a loner, rarely speaking or socializing with others. He had only one close friend, named Liu Shiwen. On December 25, 1974, the two went out together and returned home late. Liu Shiwen decided to stay overnight at Zhang Yangming's house. Exhausted from the day's activities, he quickly fell asleep. Around 2 a.m., he was suddenly awakened by a sharp, excruciating pain. When he opened his eyes, he found himself tightly bound to the bed. Zhang Yangming was standing over him, slashing at him repeatedly with a knife. In desperation, Liu Shiwen screamed for help. His cries alerted Zhang Yangming's family, who rushed in just in time to rescue him. The police investigated the attack, but Liu Shiwen survived despite sustaining multiple severe wounds. Due to the legal system's limitations at the time, Zhang Yangming was able to claim that he had been sleepwalking and had no intention of harming his friend. The police believed him, As a result, he was merely given a public reprimand and sentenced to 6 months of community service for rehabilitation. In 1978, Zhang Yaoming was working at a factory when he befriended a man named Yang Muwen. They became close due to their shared interest in playing Chinese chess. However, one day, Yang Muwen mysteriously disappeared. His family searched for him for over 2 weeks until his body was finally discovered in a cave near a riverbank. Authorities were immediately alerted, and Zhang Yaoming was arrested as the prime suspect. Once in custody, Zhang Yaoming confessed to the murder. He also admitted to dismembering the victim's limbs. People began to say that he embodied the phrase, "If he has no enemies, he will simply kill his friends for fun." Zhang Yaoming had very few close relationships, yet he had already attacked 2 of his only friends. This time, because it was an actual homicide case, he was legally required to face justice. The villagers in his hometown were so horrified by the brutality of his crime that they collectively signed a petition demanding the death penalty. Given his history, committing 2 violent attacks by the age of 18, the people felt he should be executed immediately. However, for unknown reasons, the court delayed his execution. While he was initially sentenced to death, the sentence was later reduced to life imprisonment due to his good behavior during rehabilitation. 19 years after his conviction, he was unexpectedly released. By then, his parents had passed away, and his siblings had moved elsewhere, leaving him to live alone. In 2008, the government acquired some land for development, which included Zhang Yaoming's property. He was compensated with 30 yuan. With this money, he built a cold storage facility and started a business. In his free time, he often visited Funning Town, where he played chess in the local park. His home housed 3 large and aggressive dogs, making it difficult for anyone to approach. What disturbed his neighbors the most, however, were the eerie sounds coming from his house at night. His dogs would often bark wildly, and his television was always turned up to an unusually high volume. Despite these unsettling signs, the villagers chose to keep their distance, fearing any confrontation with such a strange and dangerous man. It is understandable, and with all these factors, Zhang Yaoming became the prime suspect in this case. The police decided to search his house. When they turned his house upside down, from inside to the yard, they were horrified to find countless bones, clothes, documents, and an abundance of meat. Most shockingly, they found the body of a man named Hang Xiao, the most recent missing person, still in a state of decomposition. His limbs had been completely severed. Additionally, the police discovered a glass jar containing 20 pairs of human eyeballs preserved in alcohol. That means there were 40 eyeballs floating in the jar. Moreover, dried meat pieces were hanging everywhere. Large amounts of salted and frozen meat were stored in the freezer, and organs were scattered throughout the house. The scene was utterly horrifying. Bones were found in the yard. Shoes and documents were packed in sacks, and various body parts were either dried, stored in cold storage, or neatly arranged on plates throughout the house. After forensic examination, all the remains were confirmed to be human. DNA testing matched the victims with missing persons reported between 2007 and 2012. This meant that Zhang Yaoming was not only a murderer but also a cannibal. In his gruesome confession, Zhang Yaoming admitted to killing more than 20 young men, all with the same method. In the morning, he would go out to hunt for victims, strangling or stabbing them to death. He would then hide the bodies until nightfall. When he transported them home using a cart, the bodies were dismembered, with thigh and buttock meat salted for preservation, while internal organs were fed to his dogs and pigs. Even more horrifying, he sold human flesh to unsuspecting villagers, claiming it was ostrich meat. Many locals, unfamiliar with ostrich meat, believed him and consumed it. When the case was exposed, those who had unknowingly eaten human flesh were sickened with horror. Some even claimed they vomited repeatedly upon realizing the truth. During interrogation, Zhang Yaoming could not recall the exact number of victims, saying he had killed so many that he lost count. The police estimated at least 20 victims, but his house contained up to 50 pairs of shoes, suggesting the actual number could be much higher. On July 27, 2012, authorities announced that the case had been solved. On July 28, 2012, the People's Court of Kunming sentenced Zhang Yangming to death for intentional homicide and ordered him to compensate 11 victims' families. His death sentence was upheld during the appeal trial on January 10, 2013, and he was executed the same day at the age of 57. Due to this horrific case, numerous local officials and police officers were either dismissed or disciplined for negligence. Experts in criminal psychology struggled to explain Zhang Yangming's behavior. However, they confirmed he was not insane, as his actions followed a calculated and repetitive pattern: killing in the morning, hiding the bodies, resting during the day, and retrieving and processing the corpses at night. Some researchers speculated that Zhang Yangming might have inherited a genetic predisposition for extreme violence. As his mother and brother had also been convicted of murder, scientists have studied a gene called MAWA, often referred to as the warrior gene, which has been linked to violent behavior. In Zhang Yangming's case, his brutal acts were not driven by hunger or necessity, but simply by the desire to kill and consume human flesh. This case was later classified by Chinese media as one of the most horrifying cannibalistic crimes in the country's history.